Howdy. Patrick Star is known for being SpongeBob's best friend, whom he spends most of his time with. Patrick has even helped create some of the most memorable moments in the show. But as SpongeBob has continued to run on the air, Patrick has had moments where he has become more and more malicious and stupid, to the point where he looked like he was against SpongeBob, and certainly not his best friend. In fact, it's resulted in some of the worst episodes in the entire series. So today, let's step back into Bikini Bottom and count down the top 5 best and worst Patrick episodes. And starting with the 5th worst, The Card. Have you ever wanted an episode full of Patrick tormenting SpongeBob on and on through his own sheer stupidity? Yes, I know I'm a cliche when it comes to rhetorical questions like that, but that's exactly what this episode does. The episode centers on the new Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy trading cards that have just been released.
1 pack of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy cards, please.
While poor SpongeBob gets nothing but common cards, Patrick manages to get one of the rare cards.
Number 54! That's the best card there is!
It sure does the job, all right.
What results is an entire episode where Patrick does nothing but wander aimlessly, and SpongeBob does all he can in the process to ensure both Patrick and the card end up unscathed. Even for Patrick, he is acting impressively dim-witted in this episode.
It's SpongeBob 5.
With him wandering directly into oncoming hazards, such as almost getting the card muddy, wet, and nearly getting himself incinerated. Once Spongy and Patrick arrive at Patrick's house, Patrick decides to give the card to Spongy. Despite this very nice gesture, Patrick goes on to use this card to try and open his house as he lost his key. Then he uses the card to clean the grill, start a fire, flip burger patties, serve food on it, and use it as a napkin before giving it to SpongeBob as it inexplicably disintegrates. SpongeBob finally breaks down after an entire episode of a long emotional roller coaster, only for Patrick to reveal at the very end that he had 4 more copies of the same card. The episode is nothing but 11 minutes worth of SpongeBob endlessly stressing over the condition of an incredibly rare card, and this stress is surprisingly catchy. The only reason this episode is earlier on the list is because despite Patrick's frustrating behavior, it's implied that he simply doesn't know any better, and this cannot be said for many of the other worst episodes on this list. And for the 5th best,
Patrick Man, defender of Bikini Bottom!
So, in this episode, Patrick has reached the point where he's gotten bored of being unemployed, and he wants a sense of purpose, like Spongy. He wants his own hat.
You have a special hat, which means you get to go to your special happy working place.
So Patrick does what you'd expect. He watches TV. And here we get the first joke I've seen in a while that had me laughing out loud. The Simpsons call this a screw the audience joke.
You ever ask yourself, I'm a loser. What am I doing with my life? Then look no further. I have the answer that's helped millions of...
Be all you can possibly be.
Where they kind of turn your expectations on their head. Somehow, despite all those other things, Patrick decides that being a superhero is his calling by stepping on a plush toy. Brilliantly misleading there. That's the kind of joke I'd expect Homer in a Simpsons episode to do.
Somebody ought to take him down a peg. Or should I say down a pie?
The episode's basically about seeing Patrick at his most charmingly idiotic. Everything he does leads us to a joke where we underestimate, somehow, just how profoundly stupid he is. And this is some of my favorite voice acting from Bill Fabergek, Patrick's voice actor. He's just completely immersed in hamming Patrick's role up as Patrick Man.
My work here is done. Patrick Man's off. The city needs my help.
But you didn't do anything, Patrick. Anyway. Now, you're probably expecting Patrick to go on and try and stop crimes and do more harm than good, but weirdly, he actually does a pretty good job. He stops 2 kids from high-fiving who aren't social distancing, and he actually donates money to an old lady instead of crabs.
Hey, $1. This must be my luck day.
Job well done, Patrick Man. The setups are so ridiculous, and it's clear Patrick's voice actor is just loving the role. So I can't help but get immersed in his excitement. There's a surprising charm to just seeing our favorite characters around Bikini Bottom just having a normal day. And seeing Patrick interrupt with his antics just adds a nice comedic timing to the cake. Despite all the years I've watched of SpongeBob, these jokes all managed to completely thwart my expectations. Like, just look at this scene.
Cops, this is Boat Thief. What would we do without superheroes?
From everything to Patrick's spelling to the completely dim-witted yet dead serious cops, I was just chuckling the whole way. Would it be weird to say I actually kinda like Patrick in this role? Rather than seeing him just doing nothing every day, I like the idea of him eventually getting better at this neighborhood superhero role. And maybe eventually he could be helping ladies across the street or volunteering at community centers. A real help to Bikini Bottom. I think a few more episodes of Patrick Man might have been fun. And to be fair, he actually does unmask and defeat a supervillain. I'd say he was on a roll for his first day as a superhero. For anyone saying all later SpongeBob episodes are bad, well, honestly, I certainly can't agree with that. Episodes like Patrick Man had me laughing way too much to not call it one of my favorite Patrick episodes. And for the fourth worst Patrick episode, Patrick's Staycation. Let SpongeBob's expression serve as an omen to us, because I felt just as deflated after seeing this episode. What is worse than Patrick tormenting SpongeBob through sheer stupidity? Well, not a lot, but here Patrick intentionally takes advantage of his best friend and puts his generosity to its absolute limit. The episode begins with SpongeBob finding Patrick burnt out in his house, as he's grown tired of his routine and beckons for a vacation.
I need a break from the hustle and bustle of my everyday life.
And to be fair, if I spent as much time at home as Patrick did, I'd probably crave a change of scenery too.
Pal, what you need is a vacation.
That's it!
SpongeBob tries to help Patrick by taking him to a travel agency, but that plan turns out to be a bust since Patrick has no cash. However, Spongy gets the idea to simply give Patrick a vacation at his home, with Spongy waiting on him hand and foot. Let's hope Patrick treats this gesture with the utmost gratitude. Yeah, sorry, as you'd probably expect, he's instead a completely ungrateful, manipulative turd. And it's really a shame because SpongeBob's very creative with how he turns Patrick's home into a expensive-looking high-end hotel. But we just see Patrick repeatedly take advantage of SpongeBob's generosity and hard work, making request after request and pushing him to his limit.
Something wrong, Mr. Star?
Well, honestly, I'm not sure I like the way this room is arranged.
Arranged?
Not only does Patrick have his room repeatedly rearranged, but he also demands a bath with a diving board. It's just sad to see this good-hearted fry cook so overworked by his supposed best friend. It's episodes like this that make me wonder why SpongeBob even hangs out with Patrick. Can you imagine how grateful Sandy would be if he'd done this for her instead? That'd be a way nicer episode to see. Anyway, next the pink dolt demands SpongeBob make him a meal, while also entertaining him as he cooks, insulting him the whole way.
Lame.
Finally, he insults all that SpongeBob did for him, calling the makeshift resort SpongeBob made a dump, while simultaneously breaking into Squidward's house and stealing his meal.
I'm on vacation. The last resort I was staying at was a dump.
And as if Patrick couldn't get any more irritating, he then breaks into SpongeBob's house, forcing SpongeBob to sleep at Krabs. Fortunately, it seems like Krabs was expecting them, and this is basically routine for them now.
Patrick in your bed again?
Does anything else really need to be said? Patrick is at his worst here, being demanding, obnoxious, and cruel to his best friend. Staycation plays it up as though what Patrick is doing is comedic, but personally, I just find it sad. And I think the fourth best Patrick episode is Patrick the Game. This is just a nice joint adventure with Patrick, Spongy, Sandy, and Squidward. As you might expect from the title, Patrick creates a board game. Amazingly though, it actually turns out to be one of the most interesting board games I've ever seen, because a bit like a good Dungeons & Dragons world, the Dungeon Master is making it up as they go along, meaning it's almost impossible to know what's going to happen next. Patrick's game is very similar.
Do a surgery. Now pick a surgery card.
Remove thin bone from player to your left. This won't hurt a bit.
Bizarre, but unpredictable and surprisingly creative. And Squidward is a big participant here. And frankly, seeing Squidward take part in all these stupid games Patrick comes up with is a big part of the comedy and charm here. In fact, this is a trope I really like right here. As Alpha J once pointed out, it's more fun to see Squidward get a little calmer for being a sourpuss when he's a willing participant.
Give me the dice, because it's my turn.
rather than those bad episodes where we see Squidward's house get broken into and he just gets tormented for no reason. The interplay between these two throughout the episode is one of the most fun parts.
You mean for picking our player or for starting the game?
Both!
Okay.
Here, Squidward will actually play tons of tic-tac games with Patrick.
Many tic-tacs later.
And the jokes just work here because we've got Squiddy's dry reactions throughout the whole thing.
Are we finished? Who won?
Let's go rock, paper, butter.
Butter invent a different game.
Eventually, our four sea friends meet at Patrick's house to try the new board game. Once again, Squidward is a willing participant, and as you'd expect, the game's a broken but unpredictable creative blast to see. Overall, I felt there was something novel to seeing these four characters we know just play a game together, and I found myself legitimately chuckling at Patrick's unpredictability here, as well as Squidward's straight man act. Patrick the game is a polished modern SpongeBob. It's not necessarily going to blow you away, but its characters feel on point and Patrick is enjoyably unpredictable. And for the third worst, restraining SpongeBob. Yeah, an episode where Squidward gets a restraining order on SpongeBob. Because after all, when I think SpongeBob, I always think of lawyers and court orders. And I swear, Patrick's IQ has somehow gotten even lower than previously, and it's not particularly charming or interesting this time, to the point where I'm not even sure quite how he's standing up or breathing.
Oh, if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away.
The episode starts with SpongeBob continually pestering Squidward. How frightfully original. This naturally causes Squidward to give a lecture to SpongeBob. But things go wrong when he puts his hands on the grill and he burns himself, leading to a rather uncomfortable scene. And the level of detail on Squidward's burnt hand here is weirdly unsettling. This entire sequence is just a prolonged bout of Squidward being repeatedly hurt over and over again. This finally drives Squidward to his boiling point, and he gets a restraining order on SpongeBob. I mean, I can't completely blame him after 8 years of the guy continually breaking into his house. But anyway, this restraining order does prove to make their jobs much more difficult, leading to the dead horse of the episode himself. Patrick Star.
Notice anything different?
You see, Spongy and Krabs have Patrick be the middleman at work while this whole dispute is settled. Again, kinda nice to see Patrick actually trying to be helpful. Unfortunately, this drags out for scene after scene of Patrick just bothering Squidward endlessly, even using his clarinet as a plunger. A bit like Choir Boys, all of this happens at a snail's pace, and none of it is particularly funny or eventful. It just drags on till the viewer's eyes glaze over. Finally, it reaches the point where Squidward gets a horrible allergic reaction, and since somehow Squidward still hasn't suffered enough, Patrick attacks him, and we end on Patrick getting the restraining order.
No, Patrick! You!
Woohoo! You see, unlike Patrick Man, this episode does exactly what I expected it to, with absolutely nothing funny to me throughout it. With a half-baked, slow pacing, it takes until the second half of the episode for the true premise to even be revealed. There's too much pointless suffering of Squidward, and Patrick's too unlikable for me to say anything good about this restraining SpongeBob episode. And the third best Patrick episode is Big Pink Loser. It's no secret that Patrick isn't particularly skilled at much. Well, certainly compared to the Master Fry Cook SpongeBob anyway. This episode's concept is about just that, as Patrick tries his best to get his own award. You know, like a trophy. Spongy decides to help Patrick in the process and gets him a job at the Krusty Krab. Unfortunately, Patrick isn't exactly the best at the position, as he repeatedly makes mistakes while on the job, so SpongeBob takes him into the back room and tries to teach him the most elementary thing he could: how to open a jar.
Easy. Now you try. First, get a jar. Patrick, that's a pickle.
Ladies and gentlemen, can Patrick do it? Can he truly open a jar? Much to his delight, yes. Good work, Patrick. The two head home, and SpongeBob comments that Patrick will win that award soon enough. Patrick takes this to heart, of course, and begins copying SpongeBob's every move, with it wearing on SpongeBob very quickly. SpongeBob then tries to imitate Patrick, awards are won, and good comedy ensues. I think particularly the character writing was very important for this episode, as if the writers weren't careful, they could have made Patrick unlikable in his rabid pursuit of getting an award. But he isn't spiteful of SpongeBob at all, and he's just earnestly trying to make something of himself. Just one single award is all Patrick wants. By the same token, SpongeBob isn't particularly aggressive either. It's only when Patrick does something that really peeves SpongeBob off that he gets on his nerves.
At least I'm safe inside my mind.
At least I'm safe inside my mind.
It's a careful balance for both characters, and I think that's part of why this episode is a fan favorite in terms of Patrick episodes. Neither character is completely innocent nor wholly guilty, and at the end, Patrick was still able to get what he worked for, even if his performance at work wasn't perfect. And personally, with the seemingly endless, overwhelming, fierce competition we have in everything nowadays, I don't think that's such a bad message. Overall, Big Pink Loser's just a pleasant, funny episode. And I think the second worst Patrick episode is Oral Report. We go from Patrick taking advantage of SpongeBob's hospitality to now giving Spongy awful advice and actively trying to sabotage him right when his friend needs his help the most. In fact, half the episode just seems to be torturing the poor nervous Sponge into completely wrecking his oral report.
Is this the best you can do?
Patrick, somehow I don't think this is working.
It's mostly just SpongeBob at boating school, completely failing and botching it up. I think part of what many people dislike about this episode is that it's more painful than fun to watch. You see, SpongeBob needs a high grade on his oral report in order to pass his class and finally get his license. In his time of desperation, SpongeBob turns to the one person he should be able to depend on, Patrick. But instead, he just becomes an obstacle, throwing things at SpongeBob, jeering at him, and giving him bad advice.
Boating safe down. Boating safe down.
That's it! Yeah.
During SpongeBob's rehearsal, Patrick tries to get a hall pass, he falls asleep, and he just keeps throwing things at him. And he even calls Spongy's speech boring.
Boating safe.
Next!
Patrick, you're kind of derailing the proceedings here.
Not exactly motivating there, Patrick. Then, for some reason, he forces him onto a treadmill while giving his speech, before scaring the poor guy by bashing some cymbals. About the only part I found kind of funny was Sandy creating underwear goggles for SpongeBob's report. And as you could probably guess, this lets him see people in their underwear.
They work.
But of course, on report day, Patrick smashes them. After painfully watching him get more and more terrified, he jumps completely out of character and steals one of the boats belonging to the school and goes on a joyride. The police catch him, but arrest Mrs. Puff instead for simply being his teacher. There's only one Mrs. Puff suffering joke I've laughed at, and that was in the Patrick Man episode. Apart from that, I don't think I've ever laughed at these suffering jokes. Patrick does nothing in this episode except cause problems and make this relatively simple assignment into something Spongy has no chance of finishing. And for the second best, Patrick Smartpants. Now this is a unique take on Patrick. This was an easy choice for the list, as I still distinctly remember seeing it 15 years ago. Many people know Patrick for being SpongeBob's dim but well-meaning best friend, but this episode takes that idea and turns it on its head. One day, while jellyfishing, Patrick falls off a cliff and literally loses his head. It makes a little more sense within the episode. Anyway, SpongeBob accidentally gives Patrick a different head that makes him one of the most intelligent fish in Bikini Bottom. Though also, for some reason, it also makes him one of the most elitist, condescending, and snobby fish in Bikini Bottom.
Even the simplest of mammals could figure it out with a little thought.
But just seeing Patrick suddenly so much smarter is a fascinating concept for an episode. Patrick now speaks in an eloquent manner, and he possesses a whole lot more knowledge.
What you doing?
Just studying this amazing subspecies.
I'll show you, subspecies!
I wish they did more episodes like this, where we get a completely different take on a character we've otherwise known the shtick of for years. While I generally consider SpongeBob a reasonably smart fellow already, wouldn't it be interesting to see how he might change if he were extra smart? Unlike Patrick, maybe he'd have the wisdom to not become condescending and dismissive of his friends. Anyway, issues quickly arise as Patrick's newfound interests and tastes cause him to drift apart from not only SpongeBob, but the rest of his friends too. SpongeBob begins to feel sad as he's now lost his best friend due to how different he's become. And Patrick begins to feel lonely and alienated as he has trouble relating to his friends now. I think this aspect of the episode is crucial to how well it works. An episode with this premise could have easily made the resolution be that SpongeBob, Squidward, and Sandy get fed up with a smart Patrick and forcibly make him stupid again. But instead, both SpongeBob and Patrick are unsatisfied and yearn for the way things were. And to his credit, Patrick does try to have fun with SpongeBob again, even as his new self.
Oh, yeah!
Oh, absolutely!
They try together to make things work, and thanks to Patrick's intellect, he is able to locate where his old head resides. And to SpongeBob's credit, he once again asks if Patrick really wants to go back to being stupid, to which Patrick says he would prefer to be SpongeBob's best friend than have all the intelligence in the world. Now that's a great ending to the episode. While I personally dislike the trope in cartoons where characters become too smart to then have to become stupid to enjoy life again, I felt this was about as decent as you could make this trope work. Like, since Patrick is simply getting his old head back, I felt it worked a lot better than Homer purposely injuring himself by surgically adding a crayon to his brain.
Extended warranty? How can I lose?
Perfect.
Ugh, what a waste. Though I've personally got to point out, it really doesn't make that much sense. Sandy has always been incredibly intelligent, and she's still great friends with SpongeBob and enjoys activities with him all the time. But maybe Sandy's a little more emotionally intelligent and mature than Patrick was. I think a wise person like Sandy sees the inherent value in people beyond just their general intelligence.
I liked you better when you were a barnacle head.
Correction, Sandy. You liked him better when he wasn't pompous, conceited, and condescending to all his friends. But small nitpicks aside, overall, it's a really fascinating episode, and I found myself wanting to see this new take on more Bikini Bottom characters. And before we get to the number ones, just a couple of quick dishonorable mentions. Pet Sitter Pat. Like a lot of people, I consider this one of the worst episodes of the series, and it's a prime contender for this list. It's an entire episode on Patrick abusing Gary, even risking his friend's pet's life on multiple occasions. I try to keep some variety in my videos though, and I already talked about this one in the worst SpongeBob episodes video, though if not, it would definitely place on this worst list here. Stuck in the Ringer. This episode's entire conflict revolves around two things: SpongeBob's torment and Patrick's inability to either help his friend or realize that he's suffering. I mean, his body is literally crushed and caught in a ringer. Again, this would have made the list too if it weren't in my original worst SpongeBob video. And with those said, on to the number ones. And I can comfortably say the number one worst Patrick episode is Yours, Mine, and Mine.
Sharing is the most wonderful feeling in the world, like dancing with a magical seahorse through an enchanted kelp garden.
Oh boy. Seeing this episode once is all you need for Patrick to lose all likability. This episode shows Patrick at his absolute most malicious and cruel.
You can't take it! It's not fair!
Particularly when it comes to how he treats his best friend, to the point where he actually becomes the villain of the episode. The story starts with Patrick ordering a kid's meal from the Krusty Krab, and naturally, SpongeBob has to pay for it. He doesn't share any with SpongeBob and immediately complains that the meal doesn't come with a toy. So Mr. Krabs takes this opportunity to sell them a haphazardly made toy. But would you believe it's actually just a Krabby Patty with straw limbs and a ketchup face?
What a twist!
I know, right? What brilliant marketing! SpongeBob buys the toy as well, but Patrick convinces Spongy that it somehow belongs to both of them, and since he's talking to the kindest sea sponge in the world, he agrees. They'd agreed that they would share the meal prior, but SpongeBob paid for both the meal and the toy separately, completely invalidating this whole stupid episode's premise from the start.
It came from the meal that we're sharing. I'm familiar with the concept of sharing.
Anyway, they agree that Patrick gets to have the toy until SpongeBob gets off work, where Patrick changes his mind and says he'll give it to him tomorrow morning. All the while, we're watching SpongeBob so dearly want to play with this weird toy burger thing. Anyway, the morning finally comes, and surprise, surprise, the horrible starfish yet again tries to deceive SpongeBob and pretends he isn't home.
I just washed my hair!
You don't have any. Come on out, Patrick, it's my turn.
What is wrong with this guy? I know I've said it before, but it bears reiterating. Why do you hang out with this guy, SpongeBob? Finally, SpongeBob stands up for himself and demands the toy back, forcibly taking it. Petty squabbling ensues. Finally, Patrick just eats the toy, its original purpose, and we watch SpongeBob absolutely shattered with sadness. So Krabs finally steps in and sells them both the weird burger toys, only to have Patrick steal SpongeBob's wallet to buy them.
Patrick, that's my money.
Have you learned nothing about sharing?
I'm really not surprised at this point. We're meant to like this marine invertebrate, right? So obviously, what ruins this episode is nothing but the obnoxious big pink blob himself. No other episode I've seen makes Patrick as incredibly insufferable as here. He acts endlessly entitled and greedy. He actively deceives and tricks SpongeBob. He steals from him. He's condescending. And he actually talks down to SpongeBob when he explains to him why the toy is also his. Pinko Stinko solidifies himself here as the villain, rather than being SpongeBob's friend. The fact that the entire episode is centered on his awful behavior and him not receiving any consequence makes it even worse. Let's hope no future episodes ever characterize Patrick in such a cruel, revolting fashion ever again.
I hate them.
And personally, I think the #1 best Patrick episode is Something Smells. This one had me laughing the whole way through. We've got a good old-fashioned, charmingly oblivious Patrick, combined with our favorite cheery Sponge. In our story today, it's a Sunday, with SpongeBob making a sundae to commemorate the day of the week. However, he doesn't have any ice cream, so he decides to make a rancid concoction of ketchup, onions, and a peanut plant. Oh dear.
You know what they say, Gary? I'm easy like Sunday morning.
As you'd expect, eating it gives SpongeBob's breath the most foul stench known to Bikini Bottom, which brings the population to its knees as SpongeBob bids them hello. However, Spongy doesn't quite catch on that it's his breath that makes people run away from him, so he asks Patrick for help. Like, the worst possible person you could ask, because our pink friend here has no nose. And, well, he's an idiot. But Patrick gives it a good old college try anyway. After running through a list of possibilities, Patrick deduces that the only reason people could be running away from SpongeBob is, well,
just because you're ugly.
Ugly?
With that, Patrick spends the rest of the episode being a friend and building SpongeBob's confidence, so that his ugliness doesn't stop him from enjoying his life. In fact, he wants him to yell to the sea sky.
Proud! I am ugly and I'm proud! I'm ugly and I'm proud!
Is that what he calls it?
But soon, Patrick also thinks he caught the ugly.
I caught the ugly!
Though he finally realizes at the end that it was his morning snack that makes citizens evacuate.
We're not ugly! We just stink!
I think the important part of this episode is that Patrick is earnestly trying to help SpongeBob like himself more.
Just do what I do when I have problems. Scream!
He's not denying his appearance. He's just not making Spongy's appearance the focus of who he is. In an episode like Oral Report, the advice he gives SpongeBob couldn't possibly help him. In this episode, the ideas Patrick have are real possibilities that someone could feasibly come up with. And they did make me reflect a bit. Sure, it's sad that both of them believe that SpongeBob must be ugly, but Patrick is helping SpongeBob focus on his other strengths. What he should have been doing in SpongeBob You're Fired. Anyway, to me, what cements this as the best of the Patrick episodes is the comedy.
You gotta be kidding me.
The episode is chock full of memorable moments, such as the ugly barnacle story.
He was so ugly that everyone died. The end.
My eyes.
My eyes! My eyes!
The origin of the sand sound, and even the fish. I think most people will laugh at least once during Something Smells. The episode is well-rounded when it comes to almost every aspect, from the characters to the writing to the comedy. Above all else though, Patrick is seen at his very best here, dedicating the entire time to helping his best friend be confident in who he is, regardless of how he looks. He stays by his side the whole time and is willing to stick up for him when he's at his lowest. As such, Something Smells remains my favorite Patrick episode. Love him or hate him, I think Patrick's a character who works best when he's not in a vacuum, because it's clear the best of Patrick comes out when he's trying to be a friend to SpongeBob. And when their friendship bond is healthy, I think Spongie's show would lose a lot of its memorability without him. And if you feel I forgot an episode, feel free to leave it in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.